Hi, and welcome for tuning in. My name is Nancy Wallace-Lobbs, and you are watching the video called Analyzing a Property Deal the Right Way and Avoiding Costly Mistakes. So here's a story I'm going to tell you. So one roof job gone wrong cost a friend of mine over $7,000 extra on a property they were rehabbing, and they were flipping it. And all because the foundation was ignored. So in Texas, we have foundation issues, and when we buy distressed properties, I would say probably 85 to 90% of the properties have some kind of foundation issues going on. So if you want your investment to make money, not drain it, learning to analyze deals correctly isn't optional, it is essential. So wrong order of fixing houses or skipping steps can cost you big time. So this video is going to show you how to avoid those types of blunders. So in this video, I'm going to share a real story of an investor who lost big because of one overlooked repair, common mistakes when you're analyzing a deal, and 3 resources to help you analyze any deal like a pro. So who am I and what do I do? So my name again is Nancy Wallace-Lobbs. I've been investing in single family homes since 2006. My daughter, Kelsey Laka, and I launched Money Making Mamas, and our mission is to help moms invest in real estate and make money. So I teach my daughter the same strategies that I teach my students on how to find, analyze, and fund real estate deals. We also have a podcast by the same name, and you can find that on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or anywhere you listen to podcasts. So my journey about how to analyze property started a long time ago. And really, when we talk about analyzing a property, it just means being knowledgeable about the cost of repairs. So I've talked in other videos about how you have to know what the average sales price is of a particular property in the area that you're looking for. You have to know rental comps. And then to really figure out if the property you have under contract or want to put under contract is a good deal, you have to be able to estimate the repairs within a reasonable amount of correctness, right? You can't have too much margin of error. So in Texas, many distressed houses have foundation problems. So my investor friend who had a property under contract closed on it, and they were doing repairs. So they got a new roof. The property needed a new roof. So they went ahead and got that on and everything. And then they scheduled the plumbing person to come out even before checking the foundation. Now, what happened is they called me and asked me to come and look at the property. Now, this is after they've closed. They didn't call me beforehand and say, should we buy this property or not? So they just wanted me to come and help them determine what they should do with the property as far as a rehab. So as soon as I drove up to the property, I saw some very telltale signs that the property itself had the house was brick, and there's zigzag patterns when a house has distressed foundation. It's not shifting, and it's literally it looks like a zigzag along the brick. So they're telling me, oh, well, we had a new roof put on a couple days ago, and tomorrow the plumber's coming out to fix all the plumbing. And I said, well, what are you going to do about the foundation? And they said, what? What do you mean? And I said, well, and this was a 2-story house, so the foundation repairs are going to be costly. I said, well, it looks like you have foundation issues, based on what I'm seeing. And so then we did a walk around the house. So this was just from the front of the house. Then we did the walk around the house, and there were multiple places on the exterior where there were severe foundation cracks. Now, a couple things. One, they were brand new investors, and so when they purchased the property, they did not get an inspection. And if they had, maybe the inspector would have pointed out that they might want to have a structural engineer come out. So they didn't know how to spot foundation cracks or, do inspections. So once the foundation was fixed, they had to redo the roof, because think about this, the house, when if you're not familiar with how foundation works, repair, literally they dig down and get underneath this was a slab house. And they have to get under, and they jack up the house, and they put these kind of concrete blocks under there. That's one way they fix it. But basically the house is being shifted and it's being leveled. So you can imagine if you have a new roof on the top of the house, what's going to happen when they, lifted the house and it was settling, the roof literally started crinkling up. So they had to replace it. So that cost them like an additional $7,000. In the meantime, they were, they did purchase the biggest house in the market, in the neighborhood. And so my advice to them was, just don't over repair, don't over rehab the house, kind of stick to what the basics are, because I was afraid that they might lose money. So the five biggest costs for a rehab budget are there, and you'll hear investors talk about this, the big five, and that is the foundation, the plumbing system, the electrical, heating and AC, and the roof. So those are like five major, we're talking like those repairs alone could be thousands of dollars each. So let's just say foundation, if you gave each one of them just $5,000, you're looking at a $25,000 spend, and you haven't even gotten to the cosmetic and painting and carpeting and, and if there's termite damage and all of that. So, those are the big things. So when I get a property that I'm interested in, the first thing I do is I look at these five things to see if I'm looking at major costs for a rehab. Now, common mistakes that new investors make is they over-improve the property. They get really excited. And that's what happened to my friends. They got really excited about the property, and they were putting in custom cabinets. They were just spending, they were making luxury, and it wasn't in a luxury neighborhood. Okay. So again, they bought the biggest house in the neighborhood. It was a 2-story. It would make a great rental, but they ended up spending too much money on it. They missed that foundation repair. And so when I asked them about it, they had gotten excited about getting into the game. So their first deal, they got so emotional and over improved the property because they were just excited. They wanted to do high-end fixtures, and they wanted to do high-end, drawer pulls and that kind of thing. And they failed. One of the other things that they did is they failed to take into account how many days properties were sitting on the market, right? So they weren't flying off the shelf. The interest rates were good at the time, but they just, houses weren't moving in this particular neighborhood. So about a year later, I ran into these same investors, and I asked them, whatever happened, because they were calling me, and the house wasn't selling, and we had open houses, and we did all that, and I tried to give them, basically they tried to sell it to recoup their money. So they overpriced the property. So instead of listing it for like $235,000, they listed it for like $255,000 because they were trying to make up the money that they had overspent on the property. So long story short, they did have to lower the price of the property, and they ended up losing $35,000 just on that one deal. And they were so soured. It was really sad. They were so soured on real estate investing, they never wanted to do it again because that was, a really hard lump to swallow. Which anybody would have had that. So, but could they have avoided that? Yes. If they had had an inspection, number one, they would have known that they need to fix the foundation first, and they could have negotiated that price with the seller so that they, would have gotten the house at a reduced rate. So not getting an inspection. Now, some of my investor buddies, they disagree with this, but I feel if you're new, inspections can be really kind of save you, and it can save you thousands of dollars. And the reason I say get an inspection, they usually cost, it is dependent on the size of the property, but they're usually around $450. And even now, I still get inspections on properties because I just don't want any surprises. And I also use the inspection, if the inspector finds something, as a way to do more negotiating if I need to with the seller. But the other thing it does is it helps increase your knowledge about what to look for when you're doing a rehab. So you'll get this full on, the inspectors are there. It takes about 3 or 4 hours to fully go through. And one of the things that I've learned over the years, and it's my tip to you, when you're calling to get an inspection done, try to get an inspector that has I prefer inspectors that also have an electrical background, because to me, electrical connects everything, and if there's anything wrong with the electrical, I feel like from owning rentals, I would rather pay somebody a little bit more for the electrical because I don't want my house to burn down, right? I don't want anybody to get injured because, there was faulty electrical. And as I said, it's a negotiation point with sellers. So if the inspection report comes down, now you own the inspection report. You do not have to share it with sellers. However, if you want to make your point, what I'll do is I'll copy and paste bits and pieces from the inspector's report, because once they know about it, they have to disclose it. Like if I don't buy the house, they have to disclose it to the next person anyway, but I use it as a negotiating tool. And it also helps give you knowledge of systems. So unless you're like my background, I was a blood bank consultant, blood bank management. I didn't know anything about AC units, electrical, how old a water heater should be, none of that. We owned our own home, but if something went out, we just called somebody. So I had no idea what things cost or anything like that before I became a real estate investor. So having inspections done, you can become friends with the inspector and they'll kind of say, okay, here's what you can do. And here's, and they'll kind of give you some information about either the system itself or why it needs to be replaced, that kind of thing. So number one is the age of the systems themselves. So if you are looking at a house and water heaters now, gas, electric, usually last about 10, maybe 15 years. I mean, I've had some that went 20, but when they get a certain age, they're just going to need to be replaced. So if you're looking at a property that has an old water heater, okay, you should know that it's going to cost about $2,500 to replace that water heater. Can you get it cheaper? Probably, maybe. It depends. So as I'm speaking today, I usually budget around $2,000 to $2,500. It also depends, does it have a one of those safety valves, and is there a pan underneath it? So it's not just the water heater. It's like I've looked at houses where the water heater was in the kitchen. I don't really want it to be in the kitchen. Electrical panels. So I have looked at old homes. Remember, if you haven't watched the video about how to start investing in real estate or my no money, you don't need a lot of money down, a lot of what I talk about is my criteria: 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1978 or newer. I like newer houses now, but when I started out, and the reason for that, it has to do with the lead-based paint criteria, but also electrical panels. So I have been in some homes that were built in like the 40s and 50s, and the electrical box is inside, and it's like this big. Can you see my hands? It's like tiny, So if you're familiar with electrical panels, or go out to your garage and or maybe it's in a bedroom closet if you have an older home, but there's a certain type of panel that always needs to be replaced, and it's called Federal Pacific Electrical Panel Replacement. So it's Federal Pacific. So if you're walking a property and you're, looking at analyzing or whatever, so just know if you see one of those electrical panels in the wall and it says Federal Pacific on it, you need to replace it. You have to upgrade it. And that can run anywhere from, usually $2,500 to $3,500. And then if it's a really old house, maybe there's new wiring that needs, so that could go on and on and on, right? That's why I like to have an inspector with an electrical background. AC and heating systems, again, if they're 25, 30 years old or original to the house, or maybe they don't even have it. So you just need to know that, AC heating system, again, dependent on the size of the house, that could run you about $6,500. If the ducts have to be redone, I mean, that's another, who knows. So, those are just some really costly repairs that you don't want to get blindsided about. And then the foundation, when an inspector comes out, what they'll see some of the same signs that I've talked about, the zigzag, cracks, doors that won't close, around windows and doors on the inside, there'll be some ziggy lines going off of where the corner is. It'll go up like that. And they're not a foundation inspector, but they might say you might want to have a structural engineer come out. And so again, depending on the degree that the foundation needs to be replaced, I've spent anywhere from $2,000 all the way over $10,000 to fix a foundation on a property. So it's very important to know how to estimate these repairs and where are you getting your information. You also need to know what the properties will either sell if you're going to flip it or rent for. So look at, I like to say this, you can tell them from the Midwest, look at apples to apples and oranges to oranges. So what are similar houses in the neighborhood selling, renting for? So you want to compare a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, or a 3-bedroom, 1-bath to a 3-bedroom, 1-bath, or 3-bedroom, 2-bath. You don't want to compare it to a 4-bedroom. If the house that you're looking at only has 1-car garage, then you need to find comparable properties within, I would say, like a half-a-mile radius, right? Because you want to make sure that you're staying, because a neighborhood, let's say a mile down the road, might have better schools, or maybe they're newer properties. So you have to make sure you're looking at the same kinds of criteria across the board to get an actual figure for what the property could sell for, and rent, right? I mean, renting, you can go within like $50 to $100. And then the other thing you want to look at is days on market, plus the length of time of how long it's going to take you to rehab a property. So for example, if it's 90 days to take to sell a property, and the property you're buying is going to take a minimum of 60 days, that's 2 months. So you're looking at 3 months on the MLS and 2 months to rehab. So that's a minimum of 5 months. So you have to calculate your holding cost. If you have a private money or a hard money lender, you have to calculate your insurance, your property taxes, all of that goes into play, and you're not going to be collecting any money because you're rehabbing the property. Now, just know that when you rehab a property, if it takes 2 or 3 months to rehab, literally the market could change. So by the time you get done with that rehab, which is what happened to my friends, by the time their rehab took a little bit longer, it took like 4 months. And by the time they were done, they were in another selling season of the year, right? So usually like sometimes the holidays slow down a bit because people don't want, this was before COVID, so people weren't moving because of schools and things like that. But the market can shift, right? Or if there's a new housing development going up down the street, that could affect the property that you're purchasing. So you need to make sure you're not over improving the property and just do value adds. So value adds for me are in the kitchen and the bathrooms. Those are where you're going to get the biggest bang for the buck. And then know what renters in your area want versus what buyers want. So if you're going to do a buy and hold, for example, then most of my properties, the way I rehab them for renters is going to be different than the way I would rehab a house to flip. So for a rental property, I want things that last, that are durable, so like for flooring. I'll put carpet in the bedrooms, but I might tile throughout the rest of the house. I may or may not put garbage disposals in the kitchen. I may or may not upgrade the toilets. If it's a rental, I might just leave the toilets the way they are. If I'm going to rehab it, I might put in, new toilets. So those are some things that I think about. And then I gave the example of tile floors versus high-end finishes. And I'm looking at, when I'm doing a rental, I'm looking at functionality over luxury. And if I'm flipping a house, I look at functionality and luxury. So you want to be able to budget repairs realistically and know what order they should be done in. So for example, if you were going to sheetrock a property, but you also needed electrical work done, this may be obvious, I don't know, but you want to have the electrical work done first before you bring in someone to sheetrock, because they might need to get into the walls or something like that. Same for plumbing. You want the plumbing to be done first before, I'll give you a perfect example. So when a shower pan has to be replaced in a shower, there's no point in doing a rehab of the bathroom until they get that shower pan taken care of, because they usually have to, depend on the age of the property and the type of bathtub / standalone shower there is, they might have to bust through some concrete, so you just want to kind of use what order of repair should be done. Same with the AC heating. I usually wait until I'm completely done with the rehab before I'll install a new air conditioning unit. And here's why. While I'm rehabbing, there's dust and dirt and debris going all over. And yes, it might be hot, but I don't want my new AC unit getting clogged up with the debris and dust from the rehab. So the other thing is that you want, I talked about an inspection, and you want to include any hidden or surprise cost, like the plumbing, electrical, permits. Like you might have to pull permits or have your contractor. So is that included in the price? And depending on the type of permit, you might need a permit for electrical. You might need a permit for adding in a bathroom. You might need a permit for plumbing. And they all have different, depending on the city that you're doing it in, you have to apply for a permit. If there's moisture damage, you might have to replace some of the studs in the wall. And if you have pest issues, I've purchased homes that had termites, they had roach infestation. I had a house that had squirrel infestations. So obviously I'm going to take care of all those repairs before I start painting and putting in flooring. Now here's an example of a house that I was telling you about. So this was a house that we did rehab for an Airbnb. And this is what it looked like when we bought it. So from the inside, it looks all great. I mean, okay, so that's the deck, and there was a lot of rotten wood on that deck, so we knew we were going to have to redo the deck. But then those trees had been there for a long time, and they were literally growing up. The previous owners had literally cut holes in the deck and let those trees, and they were big trees. Well, you know what? It's expensive to have trees removed, and we found out how expensive that was. So, I mean, you're talking a chunk of change. I think it was, I want to say it was about $3,000 or $4,000 to have those trees cut down and removed. And then we had to have the stumps ground because they were underneath the deck, right? So we didn't have them completely pulled out. Now that one that's closest to the slide, the front of the slide, we did keep that one because it's on the outside of the deck, but the rest of them had to go. Now the kitchen, it looks like it's just, your normal, like, let's just fix it up, new paint, maybe some new cabinets, new appliances. But what we decided to do was get rid of that L-shaped, it's not the L-shaped arm there of the cabinets. Countertop is what I'm saying. And so when we started getting to the walls, guess what we found? We found a bunch of moisture behind the sink there. On the other side of that was actually like an enclosed patio, very small, very poorly enclosed. And when we started ripping all that out, guess what? We found mold on some of the boards. We found termites. We had a lot of termite damage in this house that we had to. And when you have termite damage, you have to replace the studs or the boards that are, keeping the property all together. So, would an inspector have found that? No. So that was a hidden cost that we kind of had to say, oh, okay, then, all right. So what you want to do is you want to avoid emotion and over improvement. So one of the things that we do is we tend to err on this higher side of what something is going to cost. For example, that termite on the last slide that I was saying about the termite cost, well, we were actually able to absorb that in our rehab budget because we overestimated on the AC unit because it turned out we didn't need a new AC unit. So if you love a property, just beware of letting the aesthetics or wish list items inflate your cost. I mean, yes, gold looks nice. So I look at a couple of things. I am more middle of the road. Now, I don't flip high-end properties. So, high-end properties, if that's something that you're interested in, I'm talking about $1 million homes, then yeah, you're going to have a different budget and you're going to have a high-end budget. I'm more of like, okay, this particular property we just looked at was an Airbnb. So it's going to be a little bit nicer than my normal rental properties. But I'm not going to over improve it so much that I'm going to go in the hole trying to rehab it. Remember, rental or resale value has limits based on the neighborhood, and stick to solid basics. Make it nice but durable for rental properties. Save luxury for flips and vacation homes. And like I said, what we did in that one was we put in all new cabinets, we put in quartz countertops, and just opened up the kitchen more. And, remember, your bottom line matters. Now, there's some tools and resources. So let's say you're brand new. You've never even been to Home Depot, or maybe you have. I like to go to Home Depot, but I always ask, where is A, B, and C? And we've bought, when you rehab many properties, it sort of becomes second nature to you. So I'm speaking more to like when you're first starting out. How do you make sure that you're estimating your repairs accurately so that you can, figure out if this is a deal or what you should be paying for the property, right? So there's some online cost estimators and rehab calculators. So one of my favorite one is off of the Bigger Pockets website. You can get a membership to Bigger Pockets, about $300 a year, and they have wonderful tools and resources right there on their website. But one of the things I love is that they have a calculator for just about everything you could think of, and you can plug in your numbers and things like that. Also, NerdWallet is another place that you can go that has a rehab estimator. And you know what? I'm old school, and I just plunk everything into an Excel spreadsheet. I do get more than one quote from qualified vendors, especially when I first started out, and I was like, okay, well, is that what it costs? So I usually get, when I didn't know what things cost, like foundation or AC or any of the 5 big, I always got 3 quotes. And I started working more with particular vendors because once you start building relationships with vendors, they might be able to cut you a deal. I'm not saying always, but I think the challenge for new investors is to find trusted contractors, right? To make sure that they're not taking advantage of you, that they are not taking your money and running. Inspection services, I think, is a great resource for new investors. Again, they're going to walk the property and you will learn by what they're looking at. Okay, and it also helps you with negotiation tactics with the sellers. Now, sometimes on like auction properties and foreclosure properties, you don't have the luxury of doing that, right? You don't always have the luxury, but I've been to wholesalers that they say, oh, hey, everybody come out and look at our property, and you can bring a contractor with you. And you know what? Even for practice, just go and have people, just call around and find out, okay, if I have a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house, it's $1,500. I need to replace the AC unit. What's it going to be? And you'll get price ranges from $6,000 to $20,000. So that there's a lot, especially in the AC and roofing, there's a lot of discrepancy between what vendors charge. So make sure that you're using someone that's reputable, maybe that you got as a referral. And then real estate comps, I've talked about this before. You can use the MLS if you're a realtor, or if you know a realtor and you can partner with them. But you can also find comps, like how this is, again, talking about what properties sell for, right? What's the average price of the sale? So you can look at Zillow, Redfin, Realtor.com, and you can also look at local county tax assessor websites. So you can pretty much any county, I know this is true in Texas, you can go in there and type in a property address in a certain county, and it'll pull up the value, the tax value. That the tax value is not always what the sales price is, but it gives you an idea of like, okay, that's what this neighborhood is all about. And then you can use budget templates that include vacancy, maintenance, and contingencies. And there's a plethora of tools out on the internet. So what I recommend is that you budget wisely and you estimate high. You want to do your due diligence and analysis before you commit funds. So the way it would work is that you would get a property under contract, right? And during your due diligence period, you are doing your analysis. And now this doesn't take days, weeks, or anything like that. You can do the analysis and, go look at the property, have an inspection set up. They usually can get out there same day, next day. And you can, within 24 hours, you could have a very good analysis of the property. That's where you save thousands and avoid regrets. Just like my friends, it was really sad that they didn't want to continue investing, but it was just, it really went to the heart of that. Nobody gets into real estate investing to lose money. So my takeaways for this video is that become familiar with the average cost of repairs, especially for those big 5, the foundation, the roof, the electrical, AC, heating, and plumbing. And if you're brand new, take the time to get an inspection. Spend the money. Even if you don't purchase the property, that's okay. It's a great learning experience. Know the order repairs should be done. So a good inspector will say, hey, okay, so the foundation looks like there's a problem. You've got some electrical issues going on. So when you have to, kind of think of it this way, when you have to rehab a property, think of it as the outside to the in, right? So you got to fix the outside, like the structure, and then you have to take care of like the electrical and plumbing, because that's kind of keeping it together. And then, of course, the roof is the top of it. And once the foundation's done, you can be doing the electrical, plumbing, and roofing all at the same time. I mean, those don't have to be separate, and there's no particular order. But just personally, I do the AC heating last, unless this has happened before when I had to put in new AC units and I needed electrical work. So I would have to coordinate the AC guy with the electrical guy. Unfortunately, I have an AC guy who is an electrical guy, right? And when you've been doing it for a while, you'll build those relationships. Get multiple quotes for your projects and educate yourself on permitting processes when needed. This is very important, especially if you're trying to flip the house or you do the repairs. Let's say you did electrical and then somebody turns you in, or the inspector, the plumbing inspector said, hey, did you get an electrical permit? And you say no, and then you try to get one, and they may, and I've had, not me personally, but I've known people that have had to tear out walls so that the electrical could be inspected. And then, learn how to be your own general contractor. So in some of the cities here in the Dallas area, you can go in and register as the general contractor. So basically what that is I'm overseeing the job. I'm working with the contractors. Instead of paying someone to do that for you, I'm hiring the different trade people to come in and do it, and I'm overseeing the work. And you can do that as well. And sometimes that works out better because you can negotiate. Sometimes when you're working with a general contractor, they have one big fat price for everything. There's a lot of stories out there about, and I myself have been taken advantage of by contractors who take the money and they don't finish the work. So, that's a whole nother video we'll talk about. So if you have questions, email me at nancy@moneymakingmamas.com and give me a follow on Instagram at money_makingmamas. And hey, if you just want to have a conversation, there's my QR code that goes right to my calendar. So thanks so much for hanging in there with me. Good luck. And you know what? Watch the video on how to get started or how to buy real estate and see. I have another one. I can't see it right now, but I have multiple in this segment. So go ahead and go find those videos. Hopefully they're just popping up for you. And good luck. And let me know if you have any questions.